Welcome back to Trust Your Eyes. Round 22 saw two of the top four teams take control, while the top of the table Sydney Swans got a massive win. It looks like the final 8 will come down to the last game of the home and away season. But we start on Friday night. Sydney came back from 27 points down in the last quarter against Collingwood, largely because of Isaac Heaney and Chad Warner's last quarters. So from this game, do you think Sydney has its mojo back? Well, it was an important win, a critical win, but I'm not going to overreact to it, and I'm going to say no, that I don't think at this stage, after just one win, Sydney has its full mojo back, because we're not even having this discussion. In fact, we're probably having a very different one if Isaac Heaney doesn't play probably the best quarter of the year. I think that's fair to say. 14 disposals, a goal. I know Chad Warner had similar numbers, but the visual impact of Heaney was quite extreme. Clearances, big contested marks, 2 or 3 of them, just was outstanding. And I think both of them overshadowed a few issues. They put McDonald in defence. He went forward. They then moved Luke Parker, who went from the forward line to the midfield and got some momentum. And the other thing they did in that last quarter was put Callum Mills as a spare behind the ball, and they gained a lot of control from that. So do they continue to do these things, or do they revert to what they did in the first 3 quarters, which wasn't working, and they looked pretty bad in the first 3 quarters and a half, really. So the forward line still has issues. Amati can't get going at all. They clearly miss Papley, and I think Hayward's a bit hurt. So again, I'm seeing some positives in that last 10 minutes. Maybe tactically they can use some things like putting Mills as a spare behind the ball in the future, kind of like what Geelong are doing with Tom Stewart, just to get a bit of control. Now with Collingwood, it's almost impossible for them to make finals. It just really hasn't been their year, and I'll probably have more to say on them next week. GWS made the giant statement of the round. They were down by 6 goals in the first quarter at the Gabba, but slowly gained control of the game. Does this result say more about the Giants or Brisbane, who had their 9-game winning streak ended? Well, I think it's pretty clear. It obviously says more about the Giants because a lot of people didn't give them hope. I thought there was maybe a 20 to 30% chance they would beat this red-hot Brisbane side. So well done. Did they get lucky that Brisbane kicked in accurately in that first quarter? Sure they did, but you always need a bit of luck. And they were still down by 30 points in that first quarter. And like a lot of other teams, I still can't fully buy into the Giants. I still think they're patchy. The coach is saying it almost every week. We're playing a good quarter here, a bad quarter here. So they're winning games. That's the important thing. They're winning close games, and they're baking wins to try and get a top 4 position. But after the quarter time, I mean, they were great. It's probably the best 3 quarters they've played in any game. I think they've played good halves and good quarters, but it's a pretty long period of time where they got control. And it was their youngsters, really exciting. James Peatling in the middle, when the pressure was hot in that second quarter, he stepped up, got a ton of clearances. Darcy Jones, the man with the helmet, was electric in the last quarter. And Aaron Cadman, his shoulders are starting to get more broad, and he's having big impact. And it was great to see him have a kind of breakout game against one of the best teams in the competition. So the Giants keep winning. A little bit patchy, but they're doing a lot better than most other AFL teams. At Brisbane, they're always going to lose one eventually. Hard to win 10 games in a row. I think they're fine. If they had nailed their shots early in the game, this game would have been over. So, depending on how they go against Collingwood next week, I think Brisbane's in good order. Saturday night had 2 thrillers, but the best of the bunch was Essendon against Gold Coast. The Bombers kicked 1 goal 9 in the last quarter, and somehow, with one final thrust forward, Mac Andrew leaped up and took a great mark. He coolly slotted the game winner and then shushed the crowd. What are the 3 biggest takeaways from the game? Well, the first takeaway, and I'm not trying to be funny or a smart aleck here, but it just feels like Essendon is cursed by the football gods, and it feels like it's been that way for a while. 1 goal 9, I know they missed set shots, but even Merritt's kick at the end there, his little snap went for a behind. I mean, just couldn't go in for a goal. And of course, with the last play, Mac Andrew takes a great marker. They should have defended it better, but it was still a fantastic mark. So that's the first point. The second point is that the Suns really needed an away win going into next season. I think they'd lost 18 in a row on the road. And now the pressure valve can be released. They know what it takes. They've been close. I think they had a close one against North Melbourne. They lost at Marvel not too long ago. So Good for them to get the win in a pretty manic game. And the last point is that Mac Andrew, we all know, is special athletically, but mentally he has some serious guts. And for him to kick that goal pretty coolly, never really looked like missing. Started it a bit right, but came back really nicely. And to want that responsibility was fantastic. The Essendon players were getting into him, and he stood up. And he's going to be a problem for a very long time, either playing forward or as an intercept defender. He is very, very special. Hawthorn's 74-point win over Carlton saw them jump the Blues on percentage and climb into 8th spot. Carlton's day wasn't only bad on the scoreboard. Curnow, Sard, Fogarty, Martin and Boyd were all injured during the game. Keeping that in mind, out of 10, how impressed were you by Hawthorn's performance? I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. The only reason I'm going to deduct a point is not really Hawthorn's fault. It's that Carlton had no players left in the second half, and I'll get to that later. But with the Hawks, even when it was close early, I thought their speed and those high half forwards, especially Dylan Moore, were already getting on top. And besides Patrick Cripps and Kennedy, no other Carlton midfielder or half forward could get any mojo and get any rhythm. So I already felt like Hawthorn had the ascendancy, and then I know that the margin was heavy, 74 points. It's probably a bit out of proportion because of all those injuries, and at the time of the recording this, apparently Harry Mackay went in for scans as well, so there's massive issues for Carlton there, but Hawthorn did what they had to do. Sam Mitchell said that. They took advantage of the injuries and ran them off their feet, and shout out to Josh Weddle, who I thought was the best player on the ground. Just fantastic, 3 goals out of defence. Now with Carlton, I have a lot of sympathy for them. I'm not a believer that you can just replace players, especially high quality ones like Curnow and Chera and Sard, who have all been out or were injured during the game. It's just impossible. I think Hawthorn started that mantra of one man out and one man in, and I think it's just wrong. You can't overcome 6 to 8 of your best players out and you're starting 22, and it's just been bad luck for Carlton, I think. A bit of mismanagement, sure, and they'll review it in the off-season, but just like Collingwood, just doesn't feel like their year at the moment, and it would be a miracle for them to make the 8 and go any further than the first round, you'd think. Geelong got an upset win on the road, defeating Fremantle, who were missing Sean Darcy, Josh Tracy and captain Alex Pearce. Freo are now in an awkward spot, 2 points clear of the 8. With 2 games left, what percentage chance do you give of Fremantle making the last 8? I'm going to give them a 50% chance because there's 2 games left, and pretty sure they just have to win one of them to be secure, but they are very difficult. The first one is away to the Giants, who have won 6 in a row, and then in round 24 they play the final game at home against Port Adelaide, who might be fighting for a top 4 spot or even a top 2 spot at that time. Now, if you had to pick the one to put all your eggs in, I think they can beat Port Adelaide at home. Next week will be the tough one, so if they lose that, don't worry too much, Freo fans, because you'll have one last go. And to me, it's just a shame. Again, the injuries. Sean Darcy is so frustrating because when he's in the ruck, their clearance game goes up a whole nother level. As good as Jackson is for Fremantle, that tap ruckman and Darcy gets them going. Alex Pearce hurts the defence. And then Josh Tracy, well, he's kicked 45 goals. And you take him out, you take all 3 of them out of that spine, and you're probably, a 30-40% worse team. And against a professional unit like Geelong, who had a leader like Dangerfield play the last quarter, you're in trouble. So I'll give them a 50% chance, and I hope Fremantle make it. I've been converted. I really like them. I didn't like them at the start of the year. I think Longmuir has done a pretty good job, but with 2 games left, it's all up for grabs. But the winners of the game in Geelong joined Port Adelaide, who beat Melbourne in a slog at the MCG to move into the top 4. Whose performance out of the 2 teams was the best and why? I'm going to go with Port Adelaide because Melbourne games are always difficult, very defensive, most of the time very defensive. Kind of an empty crowd at the MCG, not much atmosphere, but the stakes were high and a lot of teams slipped up and Port Adelaide didn't. They won by 2 points, but felt all night, even though they were behind quite a bit, that they just had too much quality and class compared to Melbourne, and they did it. Showed out at the end. Horn Francis, Zach Butters and Connor Rosie's last quarter was unbelievable, and all 3 of those guys were essentially the difference in quality of the game. Now, Geelong, I wasn't surprised they won. It wasn't a shock to me. Again, those three big important outs for Fremantle. Thought Fremantle were a bit nervy, and putting Tom Stewart in the midfield and defence has been a masterstroke. And if you watch that last quarter, Fremantle's half forward and beyond just kind of broke down. They couldn't get the ball over halfway or inside 50, and it looks like Geelong's going to finish top 4 again, and with their draw, they're a pretty big shot if some results can go their way of finishing top 2, and that means they're a big shot at the premiership. So I thought Port's win was more impressive, but Geelong did a great job, and with 2 games left, they've kind of moved up the power rankings, and they should be aiming for a top 2 finish. To finish off, my Western Bulldogs faltered on the road as a superb Adelaide side won by 39 points. The Bulldogs are back with the pack on 48 points, with North Melbourne to come next week. A lot of football fans don't trust the Dogs, and that's fair enough, but do you still trust them to at least make finals? I may be looking at this through red, white and blue glasses, but I'm going to say yes, because we look at their last 8 games, they've had 6 wins and 2 losses, and those 2 losses have been at the Adelaide Oval, and they even lost to Geelong in gather round at the Adelaide Oval. So out of their 9 losses, a third of them have come at Adelaide for whatever reason. Now, first of all, I thought Adelaide were great. Their midfield was really powerful. They were shrugging tackles off. O'Brien dominated English, and going inside 50, they were so efficient. But I do trust the Bulldogs next week against North Melbourne. I think they'll be a lot better at Marvel. But obviously the goal kicking is a big issue the last 5 weeks. They're at the bottom of the AFL. They're 18th for accuracy, and that needs to change, or else even if they make finals, you just can't kick really badly because you won't win. You won't kick enough goals. So I'll back them in to get the job done against North Melbourne next week, and then probably have a bit more to say when it comes down to that final game against the Giants, because we don't know if the Bulldogs will be safe by then. We don't know if the Giants will be safe for a home final or top 4. So the pieces will fall. Will they fall? And it's going to be a fascinating game in Ballarat to finish off the season for both of those sides. Thanks for listening to Trust Your Eyes for round 22. Good luck to all your teams, and I'll be back soon.